Live from Beit Shemesh and broadcasted around the world, you are listening to the Frum Entrepreneur Podcast with your host, Nahum Kligman. Interviews and advice from Jewish entrepreneurs from around the world. Listen, learn, be Matzliach.
Welcome to episode 9 of the Frum Entrepreneur. And today I have a fantastic guest, Yonatan Caras. Yonatan Caras is the co-founder and CTO of Glide, one of the most successful apps that is coming out of Israel today. I think one of the most successful apps out there today. We're going to hear more about the numbers, but it is absolutely a stunning program, a stunning app. So, Yonatan, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Just to give a little background, to our audience, I know Yonatan for a number of years now, probably about 6-7 years. We worked on some early projects.
Yes, 7 years, I think.
7 years?
I think so. Yeah, it goes back to really the first version of the iPhone almost. We were working together already.
And, from the very beginning, you were just fantastic to work with. I really enjoyed it. And I loved what you were doing. I loved your spirit. I loved your, sense of adventure. One of the things we'll talk about as we go through this podcast is the app studio that you put together. You always had a bigger vision for things. But just, I wanted to talk a little bit to our audience, a little bit about what Glide is. I mean, I could give the 10-second pitch, which is basically, a video walkie-talkie for your phone, but it's become so much more than that. And one of the more exciting things that you have now done is for the new Apple iWatch, right? That the new application, I want to dig into that a little bit because that's super exciting. But that is, I think, I'm sure you've heard this a million times already, but that is the Dick Tracy. Dick Tracy, is that who it was?
Yeah, that was Dick Tracy. That's the vision we've been having for almost 100 years now. Communication straight from the wrist.
Unbelievable, right? Everybody thought, hey, you could one day be able to look at your watch and be able to communicate, flawlessly through video just by looking at your watch and talking to somebody. That was the vision 100 years ago, and that has come true today thanks to Glide. So, Yonatan, why don't you dig in a little bit more about what Glide is all about?
Sure. So I'll start out with Glide, and then we can work a little bit backwards and explain how we got to where we are today.
Excellent.
So Glide is the world's most successful video messenger. Now, I'll talk what is the difference between a video messenger and video calling. So something like Skype is a live call, which requires that I start the conversation by ringing you up. You drop what you're doing in the real world. You enter into this virtual world with me. We have a conversation with a clear beginning, middle, and end. And then one of us decides to cut it off at an end. Usually there's a little bit of friction associated with that. A Skype call requires that we're both online at the same time, having the conversation at the same time with 100% of our focus right there. It's the same with a telephone call. And one of the things that we realized 3 years ago when we started Glide is that people are migrating away from the calling paradigm to communicate in a digital world to a messaging paradigm. And you've seen that with the explosion of things like Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp and Snapchat, that people appreciate the convenience. When we talk about messaging, I can send a message when it's convenient for me. If you want to consume that message immediately, you can, but you don't have to. So because it's convenient for me to make content and it's convenient for you to consume content, so that means a lot more content gets created, and thus relationships are strengthened and become more engaging and more intimate. Now, with other messengers in the past before Glide, it's always been very challenging to go from the text-based conversation and move it to the next level, to video. And the reason why is because with other solutions, the amount of time that it takes from when I record my message to when you're actually able to watch that message is measured in minutes. Sometimes it's 2 minutes, sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 20 minutes, depending on the length of the message and the networking condition.
Right.
Now, that makes it impossible for us to have a ping-pong conversation like I would have with you through SMS.
Right.
So when we set out to start Glide, we had a clear goal. The goal was, I want to have the power of video, but the convenience of SMS.
Wow.
And that was really what we overcame through a technological breakthrough. We've invented a new way to transmit video to a large number of people anywhere in the world, straight from mobile phone to mobile phone in under half a second. And that's really the innovation that came out of the engineers at Glide, which really has, to be transparent, has a history in the Israeli military and specifically the Israeli Navy, because this was something that was important to them, that boats offshore, which had a lot of challenges in their networking conditions, would be able to instantly transmit high quality video to HQ back home. So we took a lot of that experience and really packaged it to solve a real world communication challenge. And I'm very happy to say that this thought experiment, which we had 3 years ago, which then became a prototype and then became an initial version of our product, and we've grown leaps and bounds since then, has attracted over 20 million downloads. And our users, we have over 15 million users in the United States alone,
Wow.
have produced over 1.2 billion videos on our network in the last 2 years.
Wow. That's phenomenal. Really phenomenal. And now I guess with the iWatch, it's going to explode even more.
Yeah, that's actually, it's an amazing time to be in, especially for the messaging space, because messaging is going through an evolution and even a revolution. For the past 30 years, when you and I wanted to talk to each other or communicate back and forth in a convenient manner, we were always stuck to text, whether it was email, and you could even say, going back even farther with like telegraphs.
Right, or
but it was either email.
Remember beepers?
Yeah, and beepers, that's true, and IRC, and AOL Messenger. We've kind of been trained in our generation to communicate with each other through written word. But the problem is that written word is subject to confusion. It's challenging to create the content. It's often challenging to really understand what the person is trying to say, because you always are trying to minimize it. You look at the Twitter universe and we're constantly trying to take a long-winded explanation that really allows us to convey our hearts and souls out into the world, and we have to condense it into these 140 characters.
Right.
And the same with SMS is also limited to 160 characters.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the most natural way for two human beings to communicate, or a group of human beings to communicate? Well, it's really face-to-face. So what does it look like when you have people messaging each other in a face-to-face format? Well, you get the complete clarity as to what the person meant. You get the words without being condensed to a certain number of characters. You get their facial expression. You get the intonation. You get the background and environment that they're in. It's far more engaging, and it's far more transparent in terms as to what was it that this person was actually trying to say to me. And that's really the power that's attracted so many users to Glide and has motivated them to create so much content on our network.
It really is an unbelievable way of communication. And actually, that's one of the reasons, you're taking it a step further, but that's one of the reasons why I started a podcast as opposed to blogging, and why podcasting is also starting to take off now, because when you could hear the person speaking, hear the emotions behind it, you're able to convey that message in a much clearer way. And all the more so with video, right? As you're saying, it's genius, because if you could take video messaging and make it as simple as sending a text, which is what you guys have done, it really is clearly a huge winner. But I made a huge mistake once, and I want to see if you remember this conversation we had, because I made a mistake, and I'm going to explain what the mistake is. But I guess about 3.5 years ago or so, I was driving somewhere with a couple of business associates, and you gave me a call, and you said basically you were working on this new thing, this new technology, and you were looking to raise some money for it. And the way you explained it to me was that it was an application where people can sort of put together like a long birthday card, where people can upload a little video of themselves, and then it combines into one long birthday greeting, like 3 minutes long. Of going to be 20 people, 30 people. And do you remember this?
Oh, yeah, totally. So I can talk a little bit about how we evolved the vision from conception.
Yeah, so I want to get to that, but I just want to explain my mistakes were. So two things. One, when I heard this, and that was the original, or I don't know if it was the original vision, that was the vision I first heard. I basically said, it sounds interesting. I just don't see the way to monetize this. And I made two mistakes. My first mistake was I worried more about the idea than the technology. And I also didn't think about the team as much as I should have. If I would have thought about the technology behind it and the team, ideas always evolve, especially in businesses, especially in high-tech businesses. Everything is always evolving. And I made the mistake, instead of looking at, wow, Yonatan Caras, he's awesome. He's a great guy. He's a mumche in apps. He must be doing something great here, and this technology is fantastic. I just looked at the idea itself instead of putting more effort into the technology. And that I regret to this day, especially, where you guys are holding today and the future. But so let's go back a little bit. First of all, before we go into the history of Glide, I just want to go back a little bit about your personal story. Where'd you grow up? I mean, obviously your English is impeccable, so you weren't born in Israel. So how'd you get from America? Where were you born? Where'd you go to school? How'd you end up in Eretz Yisrael? And leading to, just want to talk a couple of minutes about the App Studio, because I think that was also fantastic and ahead of its time, and then going into Glide.
Sure. So I'm 32 years old. I was born in Columbia, Maryland, grew up in Columbia and the suburbs around it. I was from a secular family. I guess I'd call it a secular Zionist family. And when I was in high school, I guess went through a soul-searching period of my life. And that's really where I came back to my roots, and I got connected through Chabad, started becoming closer to the Orthodox community, in Columbia, and then eventually went off to yeshiva, and then eventually made Aliyah.
Which yeshiva did you go to?
So I went to Morristown. So it's a Chabad yeshiva in Morristown, New Jersey.
They used to do these awesome events every, Hanukkah or what it was.
Yeah.
Famous
the
for their events.
Yeah, it's a great Baal Tshuva yeshiva specifically. So that was a very, that was a turning point definitely in my life. And, as I saw, I had my fair share of, rebellion and soul searching and everything, but I thank God I was able to focus a lot of that energy and really come back to, my Jewish roots, and eventually make it here to Israel, which is the greatest country for us Jews to be living in. And all of you listeners that may be out there, just one of the things that I love about Israel is the unlimited opportunities, especially within the high-tech space. And this kind of jumps me into the next subject, which is, you mentioned very nicely, which is the team. So when I got to Israel, I started going to Machon Lev, which is the Jerusalem College of Technology.
Before you were married?
No, actually, I came to Israel. I met my wife rather quickly, and then we went back. So my wife is from New Jersey. We met in Israel. We flew back to New Jersey for the wedding, and then the last day of the Sheva Brachas, we made Aliyah.
Wow, that's what a way to celebrate Sheva Brachos.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. So then
where in New Jersey? Just out of curiosity, because I'm from Passaic.
She's from Teaneck.
Oh, okay, right, okay.
Yeah, and we got married in Livingston. There's some great wedding halls there.
Very nice.
The Crystal Plaza. So I was always into technology, even from a young age. My father was an entrepreneur. His father was an entrepreneur. We always had computers for business. I always got the hand-me-down computers. I remember being probably about 6 or 7 years old and upgrading from DOS to Windows 3.1 on my father's old 286 IBM Clone, if that means anything to anybody listening. So it was always something that I was passionate about, but I didn't really have a lot of focus. So I found that focus at the Jerusalem College of Technology, which has a men's program and a women's program, and you can focus on engineering, and they also allow for Limud Torah. So there are programs in the morning, we're for getting a parnasa. And in Israel, I believe that the best way to make a parnasa is through engineering or high tech. It's a booming industry. There's been a shortage of engineers. There's been more demand for engineers than there has been supply for the last 10 years that I've been in the country. So it's a great time for engineers to come in.
Amazing. But just to clarify, but how was was this program in Hebrew and English? How did you have the Hebrew background to be able to go through this engineering program?
So I knew I was going to make Aliyah. So for about a year prior to that, I started learning Hebrew, getting myself up to essentially what is called the Ulpan Gimel, the third level of Ulpan here, which is not enough really to succeed in an Israeli college. But one of the things that I did find is that Machon Lev had an English speakers program for the first year. So you kind of got to get your feet wet, take 1 or 2 Hebrew courses along with the rest of your basic math English courses, and then slowly progress. Now, I also have to admit my Hebrew kind of I excelled more in the vocabulary from an engineering perspective. My wife got an anthropology degree at Hebrew U in Hebrew.
Wow.
And she knows a whole different type of Hebrew than I am comfortable speaking in. I can talk about processors and circuits and different types of sorting algorithms in Hebrew, but not so much about the evolution of humanity, etc. So I wouldn't say that the language barrier is a deal breaker, especially from the engineering perspective, because math is universal. When the teacher writes up on the board a formula and explains it, once you have the basic, let's say 500 to 1,000 core vocabulary terms,
yeah.
So then you learn the subjects, and the books are also all in English, and the tests are in English, and there's plenty of external tutoring that's available in English. Many of it which is free online. There's plenty of courses that you can see from MIT or Stanford, which are the exact same courses as we're learning. Right. So it was through a lot of hard work and self-motivation that I was able to, get through the courses at my time at Machon Lev. When I was at university in Jerusalem, I met some of the brightest minds in Israel and probably even in the world. And in my senior year, that's when I received a very interesting email from Apple. I had been doing a lot of my coursework on a MacBook Pro at the time. It was actually, back then they were called PowerBook.
Right.
And I was involved in the Apple developer community because Israel is a primarily Microsoft Windows development community. So I would reach out to Apple and say, well, here's what my professor wants me to do. I have instructions on how to do it on a Windows machine. Can you help me translate that over to a Mac machine? And so I guess that attracted some attention from Apple themselves. And I was sitting in class and I saw I had an email that said, hey, we're coming out with the iPhone. Would you like to have early access to the iPhone developer kit? Wow. And I said, yes, of course. I knew looking at this device that this was going to change the world. It was going to bring the power of computing into our pockets, and it was going to connect humanity in a way that probably hadn't been done since the telephone came into our homes.
Wow.
This was that revolutionary. So I felt it. So I actually walked out of class. As I got that email, I picked up the phone. I started calling. I knew I had two lists of people that I needed to call. One was family and friends, to be able to get some seed funding, to be able to open up a software house, right. Which that's how we ended up, our relationship started, you and right. I. And then the second was I started getting on the phone with the most talented engineers of my classmates, people who had graduated the year before and people who were still students, right. And pitching to them how the iPhone was going to be the next big thing and how nobody knew how to build any apps for it. And we could really, and how every company was going to need an app for the iPhone.
Wow. So you knew this. I mean, this is like, people, when internet first came out, there were, for a few years, even though there were some people who had websites, there were a lot of businesses that held off on getting websites. Now, if you don't have a website, you're not a business. But you saw that yep. early on that you knew that every business would eventually have to have an app, and you saw that vision.
Yeah, because this was going to be because it was so easy. I had a plethora of MP3 players before the iPod, but the iPod was really the first digital music device that my mother could use, that my sister could use, that somebody who didn't come from a technology background but still would appreciate the consumer-facing element of it, would purchase and then would take the time and effort to master it and really incorporate it to be a daily item. It was the first toothbrush. And this is, I use that term in quotes. A toothbrush is a term that's used in the startup industry as, is this something that a person is going to need every day? And if they forgot one day, they would spend the rest of the day being bothered that they forgot it.
Great analogy.
So the iPod was the first toothbrush, quote unquote, and I knew just from looking at from everything that was coming out and everything we knew about the iPhone, that this was going to be the toothbrush of the smartphones. I was a Palm Pilot user beforehand, but right. I knew it wasn't a toothbrush. It was a novelty item for geeks or nerds.
Right.
And the iPhone was going to transform that.
Wow. What was their the T something was their first smartphone that combined a Palm Pilot with
the You're talking not from Apple, but from a Palm or HP themselves.
Yeah, what was that?
I don't remember what that was. I actually had a friend at the university that had one of those, and he loved it. But you just touched it, and you just felt this isn't a consumer product. This was not made by designers. This was not made by people in the music industry or in the consumer-facing product industry. This was made by engineers for engineers.
Right.
So that really is, so I left class there, and to be honest, I never went back.
Really?
So
you just
technically didn't get. Yep, I didn't get a degree, but I do feel like I did get a very valuable education. I was about a semester away from it, and so I still have, and my mother told me, go for it. I believe in you. And if it doesn't work out, you can always go back and finish your degree. Wow, and I think that was, that was really important to me, to really have her buy-in and blessing.
And your wife was just as supportive?
My wife always has believed in me and always has supported me.
Right.
But, it's always scary to be an entrepreneur and to start a business, sure. Especially when children start getting involved.
Right.
And now, a word from our sponsor. I recently met Shmuly Preisler, VP and Director of Operations of AmeriCard, a popular payment processing company with offices in New York, Toronto, and the UK. We were talking about what I am doing with the Frum Entrepreneur podcast and how I love helping my fellow Frum entrepreneurs so that they will be more successful. He said he also wanted to help out other Frum entrepreneurs, and so together we put together an amazing deal on credit card processing just for our listeners, and I've already introduced a few customers for him to take him up on his offer. With AmeriCard, there are no hidden fees, transactions are in your account in 12 hours, they have awesome customer service, and the rates cannot be beat. To learn more about this amazing deal, please check out the show notes for the episode at FromEntrepreneur.com, or if you can't wait, call 1-877-855-VISA and ask for Shmuly. Tell him I sent you and he will get you in on this offer. I fully back them and I thank them for being our first sponsor. And now, back to the show.
Wow. So how much did you raise, to start the App Studio?
So it wasn't just specifically in one raise. It basically was saying, I'm going to need, I would say altogether it was probably in the tens of thousands of dollars is what it took to get the software house off the ground. It's a very different business because it was a for-profit business. Right. So we really just needed to start bringing in those initial clients.
Right.
But it's unstable. Some months were better and some months were worse.
Right.
So at the end of the day, I'd say that it's somewhere between 50 to 100 is probably an accurate number.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So from there, now let's fast forward. Yeah. So I did we did about 50, 60 projects, right, mostly for startups through App Studio. And what happened was we started getting a lot of attention for people that said, I've got a great idea. Why don't you team up with us? Why don't you team up with me? Why don't we, go in and appeal to the venture community and why don't you make your own startup? Okay. And I said, I always had this anecdote, and it's something that I really do believe in, and I think that people can benefit a lot from this mentality, which is that, who made the most money in how in California they had the gold rush in late 1800s, early 1900s?
Yeah, in California.
So, yeah, exactly. So, who made the most money from that?
The guy selling the axe and picks.
Yep, the guy selling the pickaxe. So I said, I totally support you running off to mine for gold, but right, would you like to buy my pickaxe?
Very smart.
So then a childhood friend came to me, quite literally kidnapped me. He rented a car. He said, I want to take you out for a meeting.
Who's this?
And then he drove me about 2 hours. This is my co-founder, Ari Roisman.
Okay.
So he came out and he drove me about 2 hours. From my home to the Netzanim beach, maybe it's an hour and a half, which is a beautiful beach on the Mediterranean Sea.
Right. And
he explained to me the story of the startup that he was a founder in, or he was the first engineer in a nanotech startup,
okay,
which had discovered a new way or invented a new way to produce a very particular type of nanoparticle material at a fraction of the cost of the industry standard. And they very quickly raised a significant round of funding and then were swept up by a larger company, and they had a nice exit all within a short period of time. So he got the taste of what a very motivated and talented team can do and how much value they can create. And he pitched to me saying, let's do this. If we had the right idea, we can package it. You'll be the technical co-founder. I'll be the business co-founder. Let's do something amazing. So I really heard him
on the
out,
beach, he didn't have an idea. He just said, hey, we got to do something together.
Exactly. We didn't know what the idea was, but we knew we had the main ingredients. So then now we started looking at how are the stars aligning. So the same way that I saw the stars aligning for my previous company and had a lot of success about that. So now we wanted to look back up at the stars and see how they were shaping. And we saw a couple of different things. One we saw was that significant improvements in the ARM processors, which power mobile phones, specifically in their ability to compress and decompress video with low artifacts, meaning that the video still looks good.
Right.
So that meant that we could really improve real-time streaming, okay? And from a mobile device. The second thing that we saw was that battery life was significantly improving, meaning that users could now spend more time with their camera open without killing their phone.
Right.
Then we saw that AT&T specifically with Verizon, quickly on their heels, was laying out an LTE 4G network all over North America, and that data plans were dropping. So this also pointed us again at video is ripe for disruption. Then we saw that there was a heated up competition within the telecoms, that they were dropping data prices.
Right.
Now, all of this kind of comes together. And that was from the technology side. Then we looked from the consumer side and we saw that social networks had basically hit a plateau in terms of saturation.
Right.
And what was replacing them was private messaging. We saw the trends, how WhatsApp was going to be the next Facebook, and how Facebook was going to have to expand beyond their demographic of just kids to try and be relevant to other generations, other types of people.
Right.
They were going to have to, leverage better gaming. They were going to have to leverage better groups, things like that in order to stay relevant. Right. So we saw that, okay, we want something that is social by nature, but not a social network. Something that's mobile focused and takes advantage of all of the technical advances that are coming out, and including the significant drop in the price of cloud computing and specifically cloud file storage. So one of the problems we knew that would happen when users would start creating a lot more multimedia that's video focused is that their phones were going to fill up. So that in of itself is an opportunity. What if we could take all the videos off your phone, give you unlimited cloud-based storage, create something that was built from the ground up to be optimized for LTE networks,
right,
have something that instantly transferred videos, and then did it all within the frame of a private messenger so that you could have these intimate conversations with people that you love.
Wow.
So those were all the ideas.
And so at this point, it was just you and Ari?
Those are all just kind of bullet points.
Okay,
yeah,
when you came up with this idea,
at that time.
When you came up with this idea, it was just you and Ari that was brainstorming this?
Yes.
Okay.
And right around that time is when I actually sat down with you. I think we grabbed some coffee and I pitched it to you. And so at that point, we probably pitched it to about 100, 200 influencers, movers and shakers in the Israeli startup community.
Right.
And, we got a lot of negative feedback. A lot of people didn't really understand what it was that we were trying to do. They didn't really see the vision.
Right.
And what we realized is that we needed to be more flexible about the product. It needed to be, like I said before, it needed to be a toothbrush. And something that's for collaborative video isn't really ever going to be that type of toothbrush.
Right.
So we teamed up with our third co-founder, Adam Korbl from Melbourne, Australia, who also was suffering from the same problem, the same Skype problem that we were, which is whenever I want to Skype with my mother, she's unavailable. When she wants to Skype with me, I'm unavailable. And when we do find those little slivers of time that we're both available, the kids are cranky, so it's a poor experience for everybody.
Right.
And one of us always needs to go when the other one is just getting started.
Right.
So we said, Asher is his Hebrew name, came and said, let's build WhatsApp for video. And we looked at the video component of other messengers, and we realized that they hadn't really been built or thought out from a mobile perspective. They still were doing the same old, which is what we call store and forward, meaning I create the video on my phone. It's very heavy. It's very big. It takes up a lot of room. I have to do the curation process myself. I have to compress it and then upload it. And only then, which is 10, 15, 20 minutes, half an hour later, it actually appears on the other end. It's impossible to use that as a messenger.
Right.
So we knew that we had a lot of opportunity to improve off of the way that WhatsApp, Gmail, iMessage, all of these other apps were dealing with video from a mobile device. And that's when we really started doing our usability research and talking to potential users, talking to what we imagine the target demographic, which is, the Anglo teenage community. And that's how we formalized Glide. We packaged it. We spent non-trivial amount of time building a prototype.
Right.
And we pitched the prototype, and we're luckily able to raise a seed round of $150,000.
Okay.
And we've gone, thank God, from success to success to today. We've now actually raised over $30 million from people that are experts in the communication, video, telecom industry that really believe in what we're doing. And if you look at how you had mentioned the Apple Watch before, if you look at the Apple Watch, this thing, it's been 2 weeks and they've already sold 2 million devices. And the analysts are predicting that they're going to sell over 20 million by the end of the calendar year.
Wow.
The watches are here to stay. My daughter, who's 6 years old right now, I'm 100% convinced that her first cell phone is not going to go in her pocket, which I guess she's wearing a skirt. So that's a question right there already. But it's going to go on her wrist.
Wow.
And now on your wrist, you're not going to type. There's not a keyboard that's worth talking about on your wrist. And you're also not going to Skype. Nobody's going to sit there with their elbow up in the air for a 10, 15-minute Skype conversation. But what you will do is that Dick Tracy walkie-talkie style conversation where I lift up my wrist, I say, hey, honey, the traffic is pretty bad. I'm on my way home. Do you want me to stop at Rami Levi and pick up milk?
Right.
And then I put my wrist back down. And then my wrist vibrates and I lift it up again and I see my wife's beautiful face there. She's smiling at me saying, oh, I'm so sorry that the traffic built up. Yes, if you could pick up 2 bags of milk, because here in Israel, for some reason, we have that. Milk comes in bags.
Right.
Yeah.
With all the innovation,
go
being
ahead
a
and pick it
startup
up.
nation, we couldn't figure out a better way than milk in bags.
I'm sure it's because it's cheaper, all along the supply chain.
Right.
But it is a funny phenomenon. So that was kind of Glide from A to Z. How we started, what my background was, how we got off the ground, and then how we captured the heart of 15 million Americans, and what our vision is for communication in the future.
Wow, amazing. So first of all, your app for the iWatch is live now, I assume, correct?
Yes, it is. So it's still in its infancy. We're still figuring out exactly how people are going to use it and what's all of the nuances. So it's not the final vision. And also, Apple's initial product offering doesn't support a camera on it, but we know it's in their roadmap. And we know that certain companies that probably not allowed to say their names do have smartwatches with cameras that we've been in extensive talks with. They're very excited about what we're doing, and we're very excited to be on the forefront of this revolution in communication, bringing communication back to the human element of two people talking to each other face to face.
I mean, once, Apple adds a little camera to the watches, then that's it. It's like if every iWatch doesn't come with Glide pre-installed, they'd be ridiculous. That would just be insane.
Yep, that's how we feel as well. So we're excited to be at the right place at the right time. I think that's really been the key to any success that I've seen with any product. Is it's not just about the idea. It's not just also about the time. It's also about being at the right place at the right time.
Right. It seems to have some interesting investors. Who gave the first 150?
So we got the former CEO of Uvu, which is the number 3 most popular video calling application on mobile and desktop.
Right.
We got the former CEO of ICQ, which was, the premier, the first dominant messenger in the market.
Sure.
And since then, we've had investors who were responsible for laying down the fiber optics networks and installing broadband all over Europe.
Oh my gosh.
Our guys, their history, they broke their teeth in the communication and telecom industry. And that's really who's been not just acting as an investor, but also as advisors and personal mentors. One of the things that I feel so blessed is that I have weekly calls and bi-weekly calls with some giants that are just unbelievable human beings and unbelievable entrepreneurs in the space that I'm working in. So that's another piece of advice that I'd have for any entrepreneurs out there is find people who are experts at doing what you want to do and get them excited about it and leverage their knowledge and experience, because there's nothing like the School of Hard Knocks. There's nothing like having been through it before.
Yeah, in our last episode, we interviewed Gary Levitt from Mad Mimi, and he basically...
Oh, I just had him over to the office the other day. He's a really great guy.
Oh, he's awesome. So he just said the exact similar thing. When he was starting Mad Mimi, he went straight to the top. He actually approached the founder of Ruby on Rails to code his original software application. And he said the guy said no to him, but he went from the very, very top and then worked his way down until he got somebody that was willing to work with him. And so, what you're saying is, right up there with the most successful entrepreneurs. So
yeah. It's hard work and it's luck, but there is a formula. You can look at, and a book that I found particularly exciting was Ben Horowitz's The Hard Things of Hard Things. I would suggest that book.
And then poker. Is that the guy who wrote the book about the cheating at poker, cheating at blackjack?
I wouldn't be surprised. He is that does strike me as kind of his attitude.
Right.
But this is kind of his, I would say, entrepreneurial autobiography as to how he became the entrepreneur giant that he is, and he is a big mover and shaker the hard thing of hard things.
Okay. I will link to it in our show notes.
Yeah. And then another one I would say is Guy Kawasaki's The Art of the Start.
I read that.
Yeah. Especially the 10-20-30 principle, which is a methodology for conveying an idea. And I've used this, as a template with great success, not only in my professional life, but also taken a lot of the things that he points out in that book and used it in my personal life, whether it was, interacting with people at shul or with my landlord or even just with family members, because he really tries to explain how an idea can be transferred from one human being to another human being, right, and also convey all of that excitement and emotion. Because at the end of the day, what's going to make a person jump on board, whether it's with their checkbook or with their blood, sweat, and tears, is going to be the emotional connection. You have to get them through the heart before you're actually going to be able to get them through the brain or through their pocket.
Amazing stuff. You know what? I appreciate your time. I just wanted to go over a couple more things. First of all, how many employees do you have now?
We have 65 employees. It takes a village to run a video server. There's only about 15 companies in the world that run their own independent video streaming technology. And just to bring that into perspective, when Google went to add video to Hangouts, they outsourced it to another company.
Really?
They outsourced it to another company. And when Facebook went to add video, they also outsourced it to another company. Video is extremely challenging to manage, to maintain quality of service, and to scale.
Wow.
And in addition to that, this is an additional reason why being in Israel is so valuable, because you're going to have these niche area of expertise that are very challenging. It's kind of like, it's unbelievable, the talent pool and both in terms of the depth and breadth that is available here, all within about a 2-hour drive.
Unbelievable. And so all 65 employees are in Yerushalayim?
So we have our CEO, Ari Roisman, has actually been relocated to Palo Alto.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He's managing biz dev. So he's been out there for about 7 months now.
Oh, wow.
And then in addition to that, Chaim Hass, who is head of communications at Glide, sits in an office in New York. And then apart from that, everybody's in-house in Jerusalem.
Wow. So you guys are in Palo Alto, in New York, and in Yerushalayim. Just 2 more questions and I'll let you go. What is the vision? Like, where do you see Glide 5 years from now?
I see Glide as the most widely used video application in the world. More seconds of video created on a daily basis than any other video solution possible. And this could come through a number of different implementations. It could come where it's default built into the Apple's various hardware offerings, or it's a part of Google's operating system, or it's even provided by companies like AT&T and Verizon, or it maintains itself as an over-the-top application that needs to be downloaded. But we see what we're doing is allowing people to return to their roots, to communicate like people. And it is a new paradigm of communication, and there is a little bit of a learning curve. But what we see through our retention and engagement metrics, that once a person gets it, once that little light bulb goes off, then we've got them. And they recognize that this is how people are meant to be communicating from their phones.
Amazing. Okay, so let's just end off, just because our audience is Frum entrepreneurs, and you talk about a lot of great stuff. But how does FrumKite, how does that fit into everything you're doing? Like, do you have like minyanim at the office, or? So
we do. There's a mincha and a marav we are located in Gan Technology. Mm-hmm. And so, there's minyanim there. We get catered food into the office, and it's all hamish heksher. Right. And we also interact with the Haredi community in terms of helping inspire, extremely intelligent, motivated young people to really go for their dreams and understand that Yiddishkeit actually provides a lot of value. It teaches you how to think like an entrepreneur. It helps you stay grounded and focused and not lose sight of the vision. If it wasn't for my relationship with Hashem, and in addition, my loving family, I would not have been able to accomplish everything that I've accomplished today.
Beautiful. All right, Yonatan, I look very much forward to much more success from you and from Glide and the whole team. Keep inspiring, keep, changing the world. Obviously, we're going to be following and cheering you on. And, it really is exciting. I remember, obviously, I've been following what you've been doing since you got started, but when you won the Audience Choice Awards at the Startup Battlefield at TechCrunch, and you see a guy get up there with tzitzis hanging out and just being so awesome, it was chilling. It was really beautiful to see. It was a big Kiddush Hashem, and so I wish you continued Hatzlacha and Mazel, and just keep going, keep moving forward.
Amen, amen.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, take care, Yonatan.
Live from Beit Shemesh and broadcasted around the world, you are listening to the Frum Entrepreneur Podcast with your host, Nachum Kligman. Interviews and advice from Jewish entrepreneurs from around the world. Listen, learn, be Masliach.